We'll name a ballpark after you and raise up a glass of brew.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Forget radio
Love
dials.
Talk Radio.
Your computer is bringing you truthradio.com.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom international. I'll keep my gun. That's our interest. Try to keep my money and my religion too.
Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that.
I'm gonna keep my big BA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need, we know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good. Too bad about that one. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. My guest today is Gordon Duff, editor of Veterans Today. Hello, Gordon. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Clay.
Good morning, sir. I've got, you've been on my show several times, Gordon, and so I feel a little responsible, I guess, for you're becoming so radical. I don't know.
I'm way beyond you. I'm nowhere near J.B. Campbell now, and I think he's got his own army now. But I'm short of that.
He will.
Everybody's gotten behind you. I mean, I'm expecting you to show up on the CBS News now.
Well, they've accused me of this. I mean, for 20 years they've been accusing me of starting the militias around there. And, I got to plead guilty to that. They just don't tell you I did it in the governor's office.
Oh, let me give my little thing to the militias. One of my friends, I won't call him Commissar Wayne, was one of the leaders of the Michigan militia. Had a couple of groups because the fat guys lost in the woods couldn't stick together long enough. They disbanded when W took office, thinking that was their dream candidate, and of course he suspended habeas corpus. Their last funding and their last project was taking money from the cigarette companies because they were worried about smoking being brought to an end in backwood bars. I'd take the whole bunch of them to the woodshed. It'd take a bulldozer because that's a lot I have to be moving around. At last check, over 80% of the people in the militia movement were FBI informants.
Gordon, it's exactly what I told people. I said, people would call me and say, well, since the ADL listed me, in armed and dangerous.
Oh, my God, they've got an entire section on me. I don't know if we should give the ADL a plug. I'm on right now, and at last check on Google, the ADL is called the Anti-Defamation League. It's supposedly a Jewish-related league that defends Holocaust survivors from abuse in the news. And of course, those of us that report accurate Middle East news are critical of Israel because their behavior's a little beyond irresponsible. But this guy Foxman, when I run against him on Google, which is not the best way to check demographics, he sits at, I think, 0.3% of my national popularity. So I mention his name, Abraham Blankman is what I should call him, because I'm not going to give him any more free advertisement.
They've stopped advertising for me. You know, I mean, I was going out to 1 million people as forming the militias, and they've stopped talking about me now.
I go out to 40 million people a day. So I mean, what the heck? Of course, I'm the number one radio personality in English and Serbian right now.
Now, you know what I've told people when they call me to ask about the militias. I said, look, if there's more than 10 people in the militia, and you haven't known all of those 10 people your whole life, one of them is an informant put in to take you down. They've done the same thing with Christian identity. They put these people. Well, we want to kill all the Jews. We want to kill all the blacks.
See, Clay, I come from a different group. I run a military veterans publication.
Yes, sir.
I represent 33 million American families. Plus, we operate in 28 countries. But the 33 million American. About 5% of the veterans are daily readers. Most of my support now, and this was not true in 2003. I'm being asked to run for president. However, considering, and this is sort of what gets in, the active duty military, and they were always somewhat to the right. And I'm although a member of the Republican National Committee and a former Republican lobbyist, I'm what you would call a progressive. I will tell you flat out that if you're worth less than $20 million and you've ever voted Republican in your life, you need to cut your head off because it's not worth anything more than this. And then you've got the two stories that both parties are the same. No, they're not really the same. I mean, I've worked in Washington. The Republican Party is genuinely evil, and these people are totally moronic. The Democratic Party is worthless. So I have totally evil and worthless to compare. Now I've got some suggestions here.
Let me just stop you for a second, because I've referred to the Republican and Democratic Party as two wings of the same bird. And I've also said
there's a huge amount of truth to this, since the Democratic Party is controlled opposition or the Republican Party. The two-party system is a form of military dictatorship. This is a police state here. And this is why one would talk militia. But when one talks militia and says they're going to be Christian and they're worried about guns, and they're ignorant enough. Now, this is what happened yesterday, where I've had 2 cups of espresso, 2.5 hours sleep, and 48 hours. So, if I ramble off on you, I've got an excuse. I'm wondering if I should go door to door here. Now, I was an amateur super heavyweight boxer. Right now, I'm in my 60s. I really don't think if I go down to the gym, that I'm pretty sure middleweight's going to put me on my tail. We know it slows us down too. I can still throw an engine block 20 feet though. It's bad genes. Like with you. We're old motorcycle people. I'm biker stuff.
You got to pick up. You got to be able to pick up a Harley. I'm sorry.
I'm well. I ride a replica rice burner, a Kawasaki Retro, which is a copy of a 1961 Triumph Bonneville. I kick-start it. It'll do maybe 125 miles an hour. It has no fairings. You don't wear helmets here. This is one of those states. This is all fresco. The Harley people to me right now, and this is, and some of you are getting a bad rap on this, but it's a great motorcycle, and but I see these groups of doctors out on these things, and they look like they've never been on a motorcycle, and it's such an embarrassment. And they go down to the Harley store and they buy these outfits, and they're real bikers are a group of people. I mean, I love real bikers. There's just no better people, sorta.
Yeah, we're the kind of guys that strap the. I'm wearing a little vest here today because my propane ran out.
Well,
and
I grew up in Detroit, so I grew up with a highwayman. My brother was with them. These are people I know, and they've gotten off the track a little bit, and with the fundraising and put a little bit of extra light on themselves. The idea of the open road lifestyle that has been for the most part missing. When you've got people with $40,000 motorcycles wearing all of this gear, going down to the Dairy Queen and calling themselves bikers. Oh my heavens! No, it's as old as them. I'll still stick the wife on the back of the bike. I've got no helmet. You'll see me running corners down on the pegs. I think this is what they're for. I'm still driving. Of course, I've moved from driving American cars. I used to love Mustangs. I still do.
I've owned 65 Mustang convertibles, and I've
Oh, they're to me. My first new car was a '65 Mustang. I had a it was 3 on the floor. I had only just so much money then, but the 225 horse engine, I had just a wonderful low end. Now, at some point here when I became a nasty international banker and defense contractor, and became one of the, I've owned a number of really expensive cars. I've had planes and Porsches and whatever. Right now, I've got sitting out there a 1993 M3 BMW. The reason I can't get rid of it, it's halfway between sitting in a 1965 Hypo Mustang, the old 271 horse solid lifter guy, and the old Porsche. Now, it's sitting there with 17-inch wheels on it. Tires that come slightly to the outside. You can hear it 2.5 blocks away. And when you let up the clutch, touch the gas, you don't know what direction it's going to go because it'll go anywhere. But it's very much like it's the Germans building what you and I would be old Detroit iron. It's like sitting in a Mustang. So it's as close to that experience as I can get.
Well,
I drive up
as much as I love the Americana here, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh yeah,
and I do too. But right now we are in a critical spot, so I want to bring us back down to earth for just a moment because we're losing that. We're losing exactly what you are talking about.
Well, you've got to keep up with what I'm pretty busy actually, and I've become. Oh, heaven forbid. I moved Veterans Today, which is my plug here, VetsToday.com.
Yeah, sure.
I've moved over to the mainstream. We're confrontation with Israel, but also, of course, I have, huge readership in Israel. I've got a staff with more Jews on it than a bagel shop. We're a pretty international. We're the last thing in the world to be white supremacist. We're multicultural. I work in Africa. I have Africans and African Americans on my staff. We're 30% Jewish. We just kick Israel's tail because I look on them as axes of evil. But I really represent, if anything, and we're going back mainstream this end. And it's not me joining them, it's them joining me. After 10 years of useless war, the military, and I'm not talking just the kids, because the kids can't do a lot for us now. The kids who've been going to war for 10 years are showing some wear and tear. And I know one of my writers, I've known him for 40 years. One of my writers quit a while ago, Dale Suter, because he's got a kid with a serious head injury from Iraq that he takes care of all day. He's got another kid seriously wounded. One of my other writers, Bill Eckerd, a double amputee from Vietnam, who was in my squad in Vietnam, died in his driveway of a heart attack at 60 years old, which more or less bothers me. Another one of my video people was shot in the back of the head in Benghazi by the Libyan police under Gaddafi. And I do love those people that who believe they're hip liberals who really think that the U.S. was picking on Gaddafi, of course, who was the Rothschild candidate running Libya for 42 years. They're stupid. There's no excuse for stupid. But back to the military end. The military is joining us. I'm getting calls from Pentagon top intelligence people saying they are, and this is what you've been talking about.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let me see. I've lost
I
something.
hear that beeping there.
Yeah, let me see.
It's you and Homeland Security, isn't it?
Let's see. Okay, I found it.
Are we back, do you think?
Yes, sir, we're back. We're still on. We're still on everything.
The real issue is NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act.
Yes, sir. That's what I wanted to get you around
to. Every year, yeah, but it's more than just that. But we'll carry that one home for you.
Okay.
Every year, Congress passes a National Defense Authorization Act, and in that act, they throw private little laws all through that act. So some senator or congressman or whatever will have their pool boy made a senator or like Caligula did with his horse, or at least given citizenship anyway. But they stake little nasty personal laws in there, no taxes for granny, or 50 grand to some girlfriend who's been blackmailing them. But if you actually read these things, and this thing will be 2.5 feet tall, it'll have in it about an inch full of millions of dollars going to bizarre and obscure things. In this one, this year, it has the clear authorization where the president can declare at will martial law, can have anything done to any American that they want to. Now, we've been doing it for 10 years. Is an issue, but it's now codified into law. Here's the problem with it is this language in the NDAA is a direct violation of the oath of office of every official in the U.S., not just members of the military, or heaven forbid police, and I used to be one of those for a while, but every attorney, every judge, meaning that they are serving a government. This is technically, I've gotten legal representation on this, and my legal representation includes 2 former United States Attorney Generals, that the Congress of the United States, for supporting this bill, with the exception of Rand Paul and a few others, are currently, technically, in rebellion against the United States, just as though they had seceded from the Union, meaning that our government, that group of people in Washington, D.C., that is no longer technically our government as long as they do this. Now, it's one thing for me to just be saying this myself, but the other people saying this aren't military retirees. They are our military, and they aren't the people who take the orders. They're the people who give the orders. They said they've had enough. Now, President Obama, who I have this odd relationship with, he's the toughest guy to figure out, because he's gone after Wall Street in some ways. Then Obamacare, which has many good aspects to it, also has a horrific con in it. that throws money into the pockets of Wall Street. Nothing like the Republicans' deal, which would have been 200 times worse, but call it a compromise, it's bad. If the Republicans had their way, so this is what I tell you. If you think you're Republican, if you can live without Social Security and Medicare or Medicaid, since a lot of Americans are that poor right now, but if you can live without those two things and retire, if you want that Social Security check to stop going into the mailbox, and if you want to stop going to the doctor, I think the Republican Party is a pretty good choice. If you want your son to go to Iran, we could bury him there too, or just toss him in the water. Doesn't matter, or your daughter for that matter. If you want that, I think they're a good choice for that, because the Democrats sure aren't going. The kind of stuff that's confusing and confuses the heck out of me, and I'm an intelligence analyst. I'm a defense contractor, and I don't do this at a minor level. I meet heads of state. It's the way you see those stupid pictures of me at these functions here. Obama is terribly confusing. First of all, of course, he never promised when he took office that he was going to investigate 9/11. We saw some signs that he was going to try to see to it that war criminals responsible for the invasion of Iraq, and that being Cheney, Bush, Rumsfeld, Ashcroft, Gonzalez, Rove, and General Meyer, and a gang of about 2,000 more, were going to go to prison. Now, these are people, Americans, who are not allowed to travel outside the U.S. And a number of Americans can't travel because there are arrest warrants out for them. When we think about the end of World War II and Nazis escaping to Argentina in submarines and being hunted down, you don't realize that we have an entire American administration here that's being hunted down. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm lucky that for Vietnam, I served as a Marine infantryman. And I walked around in villages in Vietnam, played with kids, used to shoot back and forth with farmers periodically, but was generally reasonably polite. The Marines are, I think maybe more were, I'm afraid, well-organized professional military. We certainly were. For my $2 a day and 400 calories a day, my M16 E1 open flash suppressor chrome bolt rifle, the uniform I was never gotten, I'm trying to think, any clothing I ever had was stripped off either wounded or dead, but
Gordon,
go ahead.
What's happening right now, though, with this NDAA and the Lieberman bill? I'm not sure if this is passed yet, but that makes they could just declare me an enemy combatant, come pick me up, and take me to anywhere in the world that they needed a slave.
I'm just waiting for them to do that, because now the police seem more than willing to do that, and the military are telling me that if the police start doing that, the police will have what you would call a rude awakening, because the police don't own any Abrams tanks and Apache helicopters, and the military does, and they say they're not going to allow it to happen. They're very clear about this, and they're very clear to the extent. Now, President Obama has stated that he reluctantly signed this bill, but will never use its provisions. The military has stated, at not minor levels, if anyone attempts to use provisions of this bill, they will be killed. The issue here, of course, is that we have this election. I've gone through so many. I worked for Adlai Stevenson at 56. Been doing this for a long time. This one I can't stand. Now, one of my talks yesterday is with, I have a defense company. My chief of staff at my defense company is the former, I won't mention his name probably because he doesn't need publicity, but he's the former defense attaché to Israel, former NATO G2. a high-ranking Pentagon official, formerly now retired. We're all old guys. And I spend a fair amount of time talking to the military. He's U.S. Special Forces, high-ranking officer, retired. There's a hierarchy in former Special Forces. He sits at the top of that hierarchy. I know all of the top Navy SEAL, Special Forces, and Delta people. Certainly all of the retired and many of the active duty will pretty much all know me personally, because we got to go to all the same functions. I'm as big an idiot as everyone else is. And what we're doing right now, this is the big change. I would hear from these people a lot of political, I consider utter stupidity. And I'm watching them stop being stupid. These guys are getting a lot smarter. Yesterday we decided we were going to approach the Tea Party and see if we could get what was left of that shattered organization that started out as a 9/11 Truth organization, was bought by the Koch brothers, who are Zionist anti-Americans who paid this off, threw money into this, turned it over to these crazy people, Bachman, Palin, whatever, who to me are the most anti-American people on earth.
You mean Sarah Palin, the Obama's little running mate there that wants to bomb Iran, and telling the Tea Parties we need to bomb Iran?
Well, we're gonna have one of these manic breaks here. There is no Iran controversy. If somebody wanted to hurt Iran, Iran is a country with one business. They sell oil. You notice nobody has stopped them from selling any oil. Now, let me explain. I worked in international banking for a number of years. I worked for the United Nations. If you were to hire an expert witness on oil and gas banking for a court case, I am one of the people you can hire. By the way, please hire me because I can use the money. But I have the qualifications to sit in any court anywhere in the world and talk on issues of oil and gas and banking. Explain this very clearly. In January 2009, oil was at $37 a barrel. That justifies a gasoline price of about 90 cents a gallon in the United States. Oil is now at $110. Now, in January 2009, the U.S. had gone through the Bush collapse. The Bush gang had stolen everything that wasn't loose in the United States, and we were facing total economic collapse. The answer to that, of course, was to take the people who had stolen the money and give them more money, which Mr. Obama continued doing. Thank you very much.
Now, you know, I've said, Gordon, I was fairly comfortable being a right-wing extremist under Clinton, but when the real right-wing extremists came in, I guess I became a liberal. I'm not exactly where I fit right now.
We're all liberals now. You can't. It gets so much worse. Now let
me also ask you about it here. We've got to. How about this situation?
Let me carry this one home because we've got one we've got to glue together.
Go ahead.
We have oil at $37. Now Europe, we believed at that time that the only debt in Europe was the $40 billion that Greece had misplaced somehow, which they had spent building a beautiful superhighway system and train system for the Olympics. However, since then, we learned that France owes $9 trillion, that Germany's broke, the Swiss franc is broke, the pound is in full collapse, and that the British owe about $7 trillion. There is much more debt in the EU than the U.S. We owe about $15 trillion.